Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Property AI Report with Mal and Matt. My name is Mal McCallion. I'm the CEO of Model Prop, and I am here with my good friend Matt. Hey, Matt, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Mal. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you as well. And we're going to talk about some 90s music later on, randomly connected to AI. But yeah, listen, we have another packed show for you today, all about the intersection of property and AI. And we will start with, as we always do, our property news. All right, so this week on the blocks, we've got a lot to talk about. So within the property area, let's start with acquisitions. So we found out this week that Dexters has completed on its third acquisition in the last month. This is one of the smaller of their acquisitions, Cubes, but they've also nabbed Keaton's and James Alexander. Now, obviously, Keaton's is a pretty huge deal. So yeah, Matt, what's your take on all this?
Keaton's probably one of the standout ones for me. Obviously, Kai over there has built quite an impressive business and also developed Area, which he has subsequently sold on to Homeflow as part of their, I think they call it their lead manager product now, but quite a significant brand over there in East London or Central East London. And for me, it's more interesting in terms of the way that, so if you're going back when I left Foxtons, there was Countrywide, there was this behemoth acquiring agencies and LSL that had old Foxtons colleagues like Rick Wayne, who was helping LSL's acquisitions, and Lucy Noonan, who obviously now runs her own acquisitions business as well. So there's those two big main players really hoovering up companies. And now we've got these three. And of the three, I know we'll come on to Leaders Romans that have rebranded this week as well, but you got Dexters that maybe gone a little quiet compared to the others, and then you got Ameria who bought Chesterton's and Chase Buchanan. So it's for Keaton's to go into Dexters. I know Dexter's always been sort of central London focused. Both my brothers worked for them actually at certain points in time. So it's to see that and see such a prominent brand as well in Keaton's, because Dexter's had that MO since it changed all the brands into one company a few years back. Everyone gets rebranded. So it'd be interesting if that Keaton's brand disappears from East London.
Yeah, no, interesting. So I had a conversation with somebody anonymously who said that actually the Dexter's brand has, oh, sorry, their strategy is switched. So they are now looking at, for example, with Keaton's, looking at using that brand to branch out into other areas in that particular location. But you're right, that they acquired all these businesses. They actually acquired Dexter's, which was a Richmond-based random estate. They used to be called Thamesview, didn't they, back in, and then yes, acquired these and then branded them all up as Dexter's. But now, yeah, it seems to be that they are adopting what was the countrywide model, which was that there is brand equity in these localized markets of having that recognizable name. So yeah, we've just paid however many millions for this particular business. Let's not just throw
Yeah.
that aside. I wonder how long that's sensible. I have to say, I've always thought that the savings you get from marketing, from just getting everything one, and again, going back to Zoopla, when we rebranded everything as Zoopla, the power that gave us was huge. And perhaps as an online business, there's less heritage, I guess, in some of those brands, whereas you see on the high street, there's a lot more strength. But I do wonder whether actually having an aligned brand is a really important part of the future. I think you do run the risk of splitting your story and your narrative as well as a lot of cost. And that could be negative, as I think in the end it showed for Countrywide.
Well, it's an interesting one because actually Dexter's it was probably 5, 6 years ago, rebranded everyone as Dexter's. Up until that point, every acquisition kept its local acquisition and you'd need a local brand. So you had, I think it was Sneller's in Southwest London on the same street as Dexter's on the same street as others. And they went overnight and rebranded everybody. So it's 100 branches rebranded as Dexter's. And in certain locations, they kept two separate brands because of literally the same high street would have had two Dexters on the same strip. But that is a fairly recent in terms of the scheme of things. So to now go back to having that, but I think with key brands like Keaton's, and I think you touched on it last week, and I've seen Carter Jonas do the same, where you acquire something, it keeps. Carter Jonas did it with Sullivan Thomas and Boylo's, where it was those local brands for a while, and then it became Boylo's slash Carter Jonas, and then eventually Carter Jonas took it over. But yes, I suppose the key thing is if it's worked and you carry on, fine. But also having that brave enough decision to say, we'll try something different if we feel that's the right thing, not just keep your heads down and doing what you've always done.
Yeah, no, fair shout. And in terms of the kind of overall acquisitive nature, as you say, that there's a number of big, massive businesses roaming the land, snapping up different estate agent brands. What's your take? So Lomond obviously is a big one, as you say. You've got the guys behind Chesterton, you've got LRG, you've got Dexters. Who's going to win? What are they all looking for? And if I'm an independent estate agent with 15 branches, what do I need to make sure I'm tooling up?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? So touching on LRG, I'd because of Repeat and because of the sort of the work they've done there, we've known them as LRG for certainly for a while because we work in through Repeat rather. It was always three-letter code, so that's the way that the primary keys were created, and that's how geeky and sad we were. But the LRG, Loam, and Demeria, I think they all have different approaches. And so, for example, Charters was acquired by Lomond, and Rob, who was the CEO over at Charters, has now gone into Lomond and is running a much bigger area, and he's still involved. And Lomond's MO seemed to be previously, and certainly with Charters, continued having the person who ran the business remained in the business. And yes, we're now owned by a greater beast, but we're still in control of our region and our piece. And so that was one bit. And Lomond, having started up in Scotland, was very much focused on that letting portfolio side of things.
Yeah.
A myriad, obviously, I say obviously, they bought Chesterton's, and you think of Chesterton's, you think of central London more recently, but then you've also got Chase Buchanan, who are southwest London and now southern England. So it's like slightly different, and they've got a big fancy new head office based in Euston. And so it's like they're similar, but maybe without that, the people remaining in the business in the way that they did with Lomond. And then LRG, I don't know them well enough to say what sort of people you're dealing with there, but it's certainly a massive operation now compared to what was sold on all those years back.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, like you say, it's almost as time goes on, then strategies change depending on the economic impact and depending on what the businesses that they're acquiring, what they can get out of them. For example, I think with Keaton's, the main guys there are moving on and leaving that within the Dexter's kind of hierarchy already in place. And I think that's again interesting. I think that there's some key operations people waiting there as well, importantly. But yes, as you say, Kai Wheatley, who's one of the founders, and others are moving on. But yeah, I think that if I'm a 1, 2, 3 branch firm, if I'm a 14, 15 branch firm, I'm sure that there are conversations happening regularly, particularly I'd imagine around lettings books. That seems to be the thing that a lot of companies are looking as having value, more than the sales part of the business at this point. But
Dexter's an interesting one as well, aren't they? Because maybe 3 years ago they acquired, was it Housey, the online agent?
yeah,
And
yeah.
the noise at the time was that they would acquire that as their digital online presence, and sort of Housey was no longer a public thing. And I think Dexter's used Vibra Live and develop it in-house now. And so it'd be interesting to know what their technology platform is, because I think the other three are all on the same sort of technology stack.
Yeah, it was interesting. There was strong Hatched vibes for me when they acquired Housey. Connells, for reference, acquired Hatched off Adam Day, who is now blowing things up in EXP really well. But yes, he sold, and that was the first kind of online only business back in 2012, I'm going to say, 11, something like that. He sold it.
I'm pleased you put blowing things up in a positive way there.
Yeah, I did need to say that actually, rather than actually exploding it in a bad way. No,
Yeah, exactly. It reminded me when I was working over in Australia and I got in touch with someone, said, "Look, I'm running early. Do you mind if we start a meeting?" And Sal, who was the CEO now of a big business there, said, "I can't be there, but there's Brett. He's an absolute weapon. Meet him instead." And weapon in my mind had negative connotations. And I had to message my mate and said, "Look, they've said meet Brett because he's a weapon." And my mate Dave came back and went, "Yeah, he is a weapon. You should meet him." It was like, and it turns out over there, weapon is a really positive thing. In the same way that blowing things up in your lexicon means
They get inflating, that's it, rather than exploding. Yes, we're not, as a family show, we're not necessarily going to go into some of the actual definitions of words that we've just been through. But yes, I think we've got to be clear, particularly when we're going out to such a large audience, to make sure that we are we're not saying the opposite of what we mean. Let's put it that way. So yeah, so in terms of acquisition side of things, loads going on. I'm sure there's loads and loads more to come through. But yeah, it does seem to be picking up the pace, and it does seem like there's some big gorillas out there swinging at each other and competing over some of the bigger brands, and indeed some of the more powerful smaller brands as well. All right, so that's the first of our property news this week. The second, we're going stateside. We're going to talk about something that's blown up, and again, in perhaps a positive way, perhaps a negative way, about Zillow. So Zillow is the big property portal over in the States, and they have released a change to their terms and conditions, which essentially states that an agent must list a property on Zillow within 24 hours of it coming live. Otherwise, it will never be able to list on Zillow. All right. So for UK audiences, Australian audiences, others, think of that as being REA Group, think of that as being Rightmove. If Rightmove changes terms and conditions and said to you, you have to list your property with us within 24 hours, you're not allowed to just list on your own site, you're not allowed to list on socials, you're not allowed to do anything without listing on ours within that 24-hour period. Otherwise, it can never be listed on Rightmove. That feels like a big moment. And what's happened as well is then Andy Florence, who heads up CoStar, which owns the Challenger Homes.com out there, also on the market here in the UK, also trying to take over Domain in Australia. He's come out and said, this is outrageous. This is a big business just essentially trying to tell you how to market your properties. What do you think?
It's for me, you touched on obviously the UK and Australia there. It's like Property Finder in Dubai coming out and saying you have to absolutely do this with us and otherwise you can't market it. And it's quite an aggressive move, isn't it? And I think you touched on it when we were talking off air about the fact that this is almost like the last chance saloon and their aggressive approach to trying to maintain and hold your data, especially as how valuable data's always been, but becoming more and more. And I think a lot of times agencies, we forget that the content that we spend time producing, putting the descriptions together, taking all these lovely photos and putting out there is really valuable to these portals. It's their oxygen. And actually the same is true, if not tenfold, for the AI algorithms and the machine learning. So it's like by retaining that data, we were so much more powerful, but because there's the rush to get it out on the portals and get it in people's eyeballs, we do forget that. And I think this has just been reconfirmed by Zillow with the tack that they're taking is, we know you're starting to do things that don't necessarily put us front and center, and we need that. Otherwise, we're going to start withering on the vine.
Yeah, exactly. We're not having it. And I often like to think of the kind of counterfactual thing. What happens if, imagine that actually me as an agency, I'm only going to start putting the properties that I choose up on Rightmove, for example, UK example. So actually, in the first week, I'm only going to put 20%, or I'm going to hold everything back for a week. So what that then does is that means that your content is essentially, let's say, only available on your website, or perhaps on another portal or wherever you want, but it's not available on Rightmove. That means that when AI, so we've talked before on the show, and you and I have gone deep into this deep research, which is one of the tools from OpenAI. It's also from Gemini, various others, agentic AI search. So it will go, you will say, I want a 3-bedroom property overlooking the sea, blah. It will go off and it will search the entire internet and come back with results that fulfill that criteria. And it will look not just on Rightmove, not just on the other portals, but also on your websites, individual agent websites. So actually what you're starting to do is to let AI know that there is unique and exclusive content on your website. So that is the absolute nightmare scenario for these big portals, is that actually AI is now starting to discover that they don't need to go to the portals, and consumers are starting to discover they don't need to go to the portals because actually they can get some great data just by going on to ChatGPT and doing a deep research project. So this, I think, is going to be something that we need to pay attention to in, as you say, the Dubai market, in the UK and Australia and all those other markets where there is a dominant portal, because pretty soon I would imagine we're going to see clauses like this coming over to all of the major portals, because they've got a kind of, as I said, a last chance saloon of leveraging this content, of locking it in, of making sure that you have to do this for them, because they've still got the brand presence. Vendors still believe that it's critical to be on these property portals, and that may not be true this time next year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we've already seen some sort of quite independent agencies and forward-thinking agencies move to early bird off-market listing, so it doesn't go on the portal, it goes on our website, or you need to be part of our mailing list. I think of Mike Netterton at Not Dayton, who has his Robin's newsletter, and so you get the market in there. And when it's been competitive market as well, obviously things coming quicker, you get viewings. I touched on it last week. KFH had a board up round the corner from me. The board went up before they'd even got the photos and descriptions. They had viewings, and they didn't even need to get the photos and descriptions done, because it went under one of the first viewings, so it never hits the portals. But that sort of content, having a way of staggering your advertising, and you and I spoke to Neil Campbell from Listing Logic a few months ago, where he talked about that first publisher first protocol that we're seeing a lot down in Australia, where so you put your content together, you put it on your website, you then run social media paid campaigns to reach a bigger audience. And then at the 7th day, or the 48 hours, however aggressive you want to be, that's when you put it on the portals rather than just immediately going for it. Because by being that first publisher and having that weight of content, the LLMs or large language models and even the Google spiders, they index you higher because you are that first publisher of the content. So we're seeing that with Zillow and just saying we need those listings, like just any strategy you can put together to make sure that people are coming to your site first and seeing your content first is really important.
Yeah, and interestingly as well, you were telling me again off air that over in Australia, the big portals are trying to force strategies around kind of social media and trying to lock people into, or agents into, using their social media businesses and outreach rather than doing it through any marketing agencies.
That's it. So rather than using something like List and Logic and putting your social media paid campaign spend through that, they're writing into their terms discreetly that you have to spend your social media through them. And so there's a domain have AIM, REA have their own. So it's like you have to be spending that money with us rather than putting it through these other tools. Because obviously if you're spending it via them, you're putting the content through them and they're seeing your custom audiences, they're seeing who are interacting with those paid. And like with social media, it's not just Mal's opened my email or this person's clicked through on a link. It's you see the social economic data of the people who are engaging with your content as well. And that's so much more powerful.
Yeah, 100%. So not only are they forcing the payment side of things, so actually they're making some money on the social media campaigns, they're also grabbing all the data and then being able to leverage that back to the agents too. This is again, it writs large, the fact that data is so important. And for speaking to anybody who's spoken to me and Matt independently, you know that the proprietary, we are always on about your proprietary data as an agent, as a business, as an entity. This is going to be the gold going forwards. Everybody's going to be looking at it. Everyone's going to, so guard it jealously. Don't give it away. It's too important and it will become increasingly. Also keep an eye out. I'm sure that in due course, in the next few months, there will be changes to terms and conditions. Normally, everybody, myself included, just skips through those terms and conditions because they're so boring. When you next get a Rightmove update to terms and conditions, just have a little look. If you want, get ChatGPT to compare the old ones with the new ones and tell you what's changed, if you want to do it real quick, because there will be some stuff in there I would almost guarantee that is going to be it's going to tie you up a little bit, if I put it that way. All right, let's move on from core data within the portal space. Actually, no, let us just very quickly touch on the fact that there was a Russian property portal called DomClick this week who basically announced a new Know Your Neighbor feature on their property portal. So imagine you're able to go on to Property Finder in Dubai, Rightmove here in the UK, and you're able to actually see what your neighbours earn, who they are, their demographic profiles, age, gender, average income, car ownership, whether they've got children, whether they've got pets. So you're able to know all that stuff in advance of actually looking at the property. And it's pretty dark, right? It feels a little bit kind of dystopian.
It's an extension of knocking on next door and just seeing what they're like when they answer the door, aren't they, on a viewing? It's the sort of thing that I'm sure as we do this, the likes of 20EA, Price Hubble, Spriff, they'll all be thinking, wonder what extra fields and variables we can put in our feeds.
Yeah, how far? It's probably that everybody's got, or is starting to gather this data. It's just how much can we push it out there without seeming too terrifying?
I remember when the births register first came out, we had something similar washed through our data at Foxtons, and the call centre had too much information. So they picked up the phone and said, "Oh, Mal, I can see you've just had another child. Do you want to move so you can get an extra bedroom?" And it's a bit like, that's the so it had to become a bit more granular, obfuscated. Call Mal. I'm not going to tell you why.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like now, it
Yeah.
could be Mal. I can see you just had a pay rise and you've spent this much on Deliveroo last week, and or whatever Tom clicked got within their data set.
Yeah, pretty terrifying. Anyway, yeah, moving on. And so we were looking at and chatting, as we have done, about social media and reliance upon it and what the portals are doing. Now, you had a great article chucked in about TikTok and about how US real estate agents, based on the fact that TikTok is notionally going to disappear in 75 days, although it was 90 days ago, it was then like 180 days before that or whatever. So there's concern in the community about reliance on particular social media platforms that may suddenly get the bullet.
That's it. And so, I was thinking of a funny comment I heard while I was back up north the other week, which was that people aren't on TikTok, but all they do is they watch reels that are TikTok videos and forward them on. And so it's a case of it was really just encouraging people to diversify just from the TikTok and make sure they've got that content. And you look at Dubai, you look at the UK, especially sort of Southern England, and everyone's doing the Instagram reels and for the high-end properties and the viewings. And I saw a great one with Dee Quealy of Quealy & Co, where he was showing around not just the property, but the streets and the local area. And so people are taking those and putting them. But this one from Rowan over at Elite Agent was saying in the US, most people are just using TikTok and TikTok only. And obviously, as you say, with so that had another 7-5 day stay of execution, and you could argue that's going to keep rolling. But the fact that the American agencies are purely posting on TikTok and nothing else could well take another of their advertising channels away. And in line with what we've talked about with Zillow, that's backing them into a bit of a corner.
Yeah, 100%. If you're building like a massive audience on TikTok, I'm sure that's great. But then if suddenly TikTok is turned off because essentially the Chinese Communist Party has shown no interest whatsoever in letting ByteDance sell it. Every time they keep going back and going, we've got all these bidders for TikTok. Why don't we just, which one of these do you want? And they just go, we're not going to sell it.
That's a nice segue into one of your other points as well, wasn't it, about the Chinese Communist Party, where we're not just glazing here, there is some negativity. Thanks for teaching me a new word there, Mal.
Crazy. By the way, I got that from my teenage kids. Apparently, for those that don't know, which is probably, well, I'd never heard of it before. It means I'm puffing something up and not accepting any negativity, glazing. So glazing.
As you were saying that, I'm disappointed you used the term puffing something up because I was thinking of when someone says they're a bit glazed, but that's not the same thing because we are a kids and family show, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Remember that. We keep having to remind that.
Yeah, exactly. No warnings on this podcast.
100%. So that is our news for the property side of our Property AI report this week. Now it is time to go into our quickfire AI and tech news. Okay, so this week there is so much to talk about these frontier models. So frontier models, just to clarify, are essentially the cutting edge large language models where they're building out the likes of OpenAI's ChatGPT. And we've got Google's Gemini, there is X and XAI's Grok, there is Anthropic's Claude, there is Meta's Llama. All of these big AI businesses are punting out more and more of these cutting edge models. But Meta has been in the news this week particularly. They've launched Llama 4. Now, Meta's big shtick is that this is open source. All right. So they built the biggest open source platform historically up to the point of DeepSeek launching, whereby you can just take their piece of kit and build off the top of it. So Llama 4 was the next generation of their open source model. Llama 3 was really well received, but they seem to have blown it. All right. Yeah. Llama 4 is essentially everyone's just gone a little bit meh.
That's a good summary of it, isn't it? I don't think it's just a little bit meh either, was it? It's the fact that in the rankings and the sort of the place that everyone puts their models out there to be tested and checked against each other, they tried to game the system by putting out a different version of the model and quickly got.
You have to say allegedly there. Allegedly.
Did I not say that?
I'll just scatter them in afterwards at random intervals.
That's Zuckerberg's listening to us, right?
He's always on the phone, mate. It just never stops.
But the fact that they've allegedly put that model out there and they're expecting not to be found out, and that's created not just the meh, but the further noise around it, hasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so it is. Yeah, they threw it out on a Saturday, which is a bit sus anyway. It's like that's a bit of a lazy old day to throw it out. There was some suspicion that it was because there was something big coming last week as well. We'll talk about Google and various others, but yeah, it just seems to be so on the benchmarks, it performs really well. But as soon as everybody started actually using it, and these obviously people using this are the absolute best AI people in the whole world, look at it and they're going, this is the benchmark. Now I try and do exactly what you've just done on the benchmark and it doesn't work, or it works really much more slowly. Then obviously they've optimized it for the benchmark allegedly, and that means that yeah, it's just not the piece of kit that they're advertising. So that is a real big problem for them, and they've obviously got DeepSeek breathing down their neck as well in terms of the open source. DeepSeek is much cheaper. Many say it is much better. So yeah, it just seems like a massive miss.
And I think on the flip side of it, there, you touched on, so it was Google Cloud Next 25 last week, wasn't it? So they're big events. And for those just going back through it, their model being Gemini, or the artist formerly known as Bard. It was only a year ago that we were hearing about Bard suggesting to put glue on pizzas and that pregnant women should be smoking 2 or 3 cigarettes a day. And so it's Bard got rebranded and it is now Gemini, and Gemini is the one that's popping up at the top of your Google search results and becoming really embedded in a lot of things you do. And as part of that Google Next 25, they announced that they're moving to agentic as well. So just in a year, although in timescales with AI, that's actually quite a long time, isn't it? As we've talked about previously, that they've managed to turn things around and actually are now pushing seemingly people like Meta into gaffes like they have done with Llama.
I think you're absolutely right. It is competitive pressure that's forcing some of these businesses to take risks that they wouldn't otherwise take. And I think you can see that really with OpenAI as well. So OpenAI, they have bowed to a lot of pressure to take off some guardrails. So actually, historically, it would refuse to do a lot of things, particularly around celebrities, images, and things like that. And it now looks like under pressure from Grok and others that they've removed a lot of that. And Sam Altman's been suddenly saying, we don't want to tell you what to think or anything like that to provide any censorship. It should just be whatever you want, yeah, which is actually very different to what he was saying a year ago before Trump got in. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of pressure out there at the top end, and it's forcing people into doing things that more quickly and with less rigor than they might otherwise do. And I think yeah, as you say, for Meta, that's caused them to release something that probably isn't what they would want to release otherwise. But you mentioned Google, and you mentioned the fact that they are absolutely starting to smash it. Historically, they, as they say, have been laggards. I think they got massively caught out by the ChatGPT moment, 30th of November 2022, when OpenAI released ChatGPT, and suddenly everyone went, oh my God, AI is amazing. And they've been playing catch up ever since, but they may now have actually caught up and overtaken.
Yeah, very much. And then the fact it's embedded in Google Workspace as well. I know Microsoft's got Copilot, but Gemini really is impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are attempting to quickfire this quickfire round and not necessarily get too bogged down in talking about stuff. So next up, we wanted to talk about Shopify. So Shopify is a business, people know that the e-commerce business, help people to sell stuff via their online shops. And he is telling his 8,000 employees that they should consider using AI before growing headcount. All right. So there was a number of different things that they were talking about, but essentially their CEO is on record now as saying that people have to demonstrate why AI cannot perform a job before they're permitted to ask for more headcount and resources. Now, often it's been said that you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you're going to lose your job to somebody who is using AI, and this kind of essentially riffed on that, right?
And I think in a week where it's come out from Stanford that in America last year, I think 78% of businesses in America are using AI in some form, which is up from 55% the previous year. And you and I commented, what are the other 22% doing? To have the CEO of something like Shopify, where I think pretty much everybody is aware of it and is probably buying things from Shopify, to have that CEO saying as a company mandate, this is the thing you need to be thinking about, is like actually nailing the colours to the mast, saying this is what you need to do. But also it's put it out there publicly as well, because he tweeted it or X'd it or whatever the right terminology is these days for his memo, didn't he? He said, oh, this is being leaked, so here it is, world, go and have a look at it. So it's very much the way that I think most people should be thinking now. And a lot of companies are backpedaling, aren't they, and saying, where can I retrofit AI into my business? And a lot of that is looking at processes rather than just dropping a tool in. But it's actually saying, going forward, don't just say, okay, I need another copywriter. Could that copywriter be done by something else? And obviously focus there on marketing, but it's all over your business, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, you and I speak to agencies and to other businesses in the prop tech space all the time. And yeah, I think our advice is now more than ever. Look, but basically, when you are looking and unpicking the tasks that you are doing within your business, this goes for anybody listening, the tasks that you're doing in your business, if you break them all out, every single job is made up of tasks. So you break them all out, you work out actually what you can do better with AI, because then you're freeing your humans up to go and do the human stuff. All right, because for a long time, technology has almost surreptitiously kidnapped us in front of the screens, and we do their bidding by typing stuff in and feeding data, all that sort of stuff. Now, AI is going to be able to do all that stuff. So that means we can all look up from our screens and go out and touch grass and make relationships with people and try and find more leads and all that sort of stuff with that the things that only humans can do. I think we're certainly what we spend a lot of time talking to potential clients and customers about is just rethink this about actually the stuff that isn't fun, the stuff that is mundane, boring stuff, get that done by the machines because they're able to do it now.
And importantly, when you're unpicking those things, take a moment. Are you just doing certain steps in that process because the systems that you've used previously have forced you to take those steps? Like, what is the actual real world thing you're trying to achieve? Because then you could just be skipping maybe 10 steps. We talked about ChatGPT 4 image last week, but if your aim is to produce a flyer for the Easter fair at your local school, rather than going through those 15 steps, go straight to what is the brief and feed that into one of the models and see. But every process, the number of times we do it this way because that's the way we've always done it, it's a bit old and cliche, but you don't have to just take those extra steps if you can reimagine it from the start.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I think that, as you say, that somebody from a business such as this, which is actually an older tech business, right, has been around for a while, is now going all in on this, I think is really powerful and a signifier of where good, decent businesses are starting to think and think properly. So that's the Shopify. Waymo is also in the news this week. Little bit, we were talking about data earlier on and how important that is. Waymo has data internally of who their riders are. Again, Waymo, just for clarification, is a mobility, is that the right phrase? A business. What they do is they have these automated cars which drive around San Francisco, and I think they're now going into Phoenix in Arizona and a couple of other places now where there is no driver. Right, so essentially it is autonomous cars. You go and you sit in it and it will zoom off and take you around. And apparently it's amazing. I've never had the pleasure, but we'll all find out about it in the coming years. But yes, they've been slapped a little bit because they started to release these terms and conditions that said that they can train their models on, or they train their AIs on people's data for who are traveling with them. So I think this kind of plays into our previous check the terms and conditions, people. Make sure that there is nothing in there that you are unhappy with. And if you need to, get AI to do it, because yeah, it will be able to pick loads of things out.
So it's basically a Waymo, it's a driverless taxi. So it's be gearing up to see that if someone's forehead is slightly sweaty and they're looking slightly peaky after a heavy night out, they're about to maybe be sick out the window and to kick them out of the car or not even accept the fare at that certain time.
Yeah, and I'm appreciating your analogy, which I'm sure many listeners can attest to. And if the taxi drivers had known that this was going to happen, then they wouldn't pick the fares up either outside the station that night. Right, next up, we're going to go back to the 90s, as promised right at the start. We have a new video from the band Pulp, who aging people such as me, I'm not going to necessarily include Matt in that, but I know he likes it, remember from back in the day. So they're back and they've got a new video out, and their song is called Spike Island, which Matt's going to tell you all about. But yeah, the video has got tons of AI in it, so therefore I love it. It's really funny.
I think, yeah, you're always going to love this, aren't you? Pulp doing a song about the 90s and the pioneering great gig, the Roses at Spike Island. Although Jarvis Cocker this week, who's the lead singer of the band, did come out to say he didn't actually attend. But the video, obviously, just have a watch of it. And I thought it was really interesting where the prompts were being overlaid on the video that the person was actually putting. And they basically take photos of Pulp from the 90s and supplement them with AI to make them come to life with people, don't they? So what's the term? Just give it a watch.
Yeah, exactly. It's really good. And yes, I think one of us is going to
Yeah,
see
I'll be there. So they're from Sheffield, City of Steel, and it was my Steel wedding anniversary this year. So obviously I've got tickets for Pulp as part of that.
Well done, mate. Congratulations and congratulations on the anniversary as well. Amazing. All right. We also just want to touch on Dubai, and it's a little bit
Retro.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because it was only like a few years ago that blockchain was absolutely the thing. And now, yes, but in terms of its solidity and what blockchain can do, it's never quite been realized to this point. But even in the world of AI, still there is a space for this technology over in Dubai.
That's it. And it's a quick fire round, so we'll wrap up on it. But the blockchain, basically a technology that diversifies the record across multiple computers, making it exceptionally secure. Dubai have now mandating this as part of their property transaction process. So Dubai's what 4 million people by the end of this year, so about half the size of London, actually maybe slightly smaller, but they'll be using this technology as a way of recording their property transactions, which will speed up that process, which obviously anyone in the UK can only dream of at this point in time.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so that's the end of our quick fire round for this week. We're now going to talk about our tool of the week. All right, so our tool of the week this week, there was an announcement this week about an AI tool that is being used by the likes of Aaron and various others on virtual staging. Again, there are many people doing this out there, so don't necessarily want to focus in on one particular business, but do go and find. Essentially what it does is you can take an image of any property and you can get rid of the furniture in that, and you can then get it redressed by AI to look absolutely beautiful. If properties you can't be bothered, or the vendor cannot be bothered to tidy up, or they want to get on the market really quickly, then you can make this offer, and it's really cost effective and quite powerful. So yeah, the likes of Aaron are using it. I'm sure there are other businesses out there as well. But yeah, just thinking about what tools are available that are going to make an impact to estate and lettings agents businesses this week, then that certainly feels like it's one that could really help people. All right, so that is us for this week. Matt, what are you up to this week? Got anything exciting coming up?
I'm jumping on the train up to Pontefract after this, so a couple of days in sunny Yorkshire, which seems absurd given I've just driven down from northeast Lincolnshire, but back up there, and then it's a 4-day week, isn't it, with Easter coming up? How about yourself, Mal?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to get everything done before then, essentially, which is going to be broadly impossible, I'm sure. But no, look, I'm seeing some great agents. I'm off later on today to up into Greater London to see a couple of good agencies. So yeah, keeping busy as ever. But yes, looking forward to catching up and seeing what we've got next week as well from all of the AI and property news. So thank you very much indeed for listening this week. Me and Matt will be back again next week, as I say. Until then, enjoy your weeks. Happy Easter, and we will see you in a few days.
Have a great week.